You good to go?
Is it in here? I never read this. I know.
Yep.
One of these.
There's no clock. Where's the flag?
Especially this year in particular.
It looks like this, but it has.
Actually, we don't get to do that. Everybody's ready. So nice and quick,
Yeah, we'll do it like this. I came out Denise's car. It's a little softer now.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our April 22nd Board of Education meeting and weathering yet another rainy day here. We'll start the evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to start the evening off with a student presentation from the Catherine McGee Middle School. So Sal, you're up.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. One of the goals of our teaching staff here at McGee is to support our students in the application of new learning to authentic situations that have meaning and relevance to the learner. To meet that target, science teachers Miss Andrea Gallo and Mrs. Jen Zaitoon engaged 8th grade students in investigation involving properties of and interactions of waves, sound waves specifically. Students were afforded an opportunity to choose and research a topic on sound and design and plan their own controlled experiments to come up with and share their own conclusions at a school-wide science fair. I'd like to proudly turn our presentation over to Ms. Gallo and Mrs. Zaitoon and our students for further explanation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Zaitoon. Our science fair project was broken up into 6 major tasks. During task 1, students were encouraged to ask questions throughout the unit, and we added many of those questions to a question board. And so by the end of the unit, they were provided with a list of about 30 different possible science fair questions that they could pursue. And they were encouraged to continue to think of questions of their own. And then, so the end of task 1, they finally would choose upon a question to pursue either individually or as a group. Task 2, we asked students to explain why they were interested in learning more about their chosen topic and explain their personal rationale for choosing it. And then we also gave them examples of reliable and unreliable sources of information and asked them to begin their search for reliable sources for their background research, which was task 3. So during task 3, each student was responsible for conducting their own independent research using at least 3 different reliable sources of information. And again, these sources of information were ideally different from their partners so that when they regrouped with their other partners, they would have different pieces of information and perspectives to share.
Hi, I'm Miss Gallo. So after the students did their research, they were able to conduct their own experiments. So the PTO purchased us these lab quests and different sensors last year, so they were able to actually use these to collect real-time data for whatever their chosen experiment was. Then during task 5, they took this information, they took their research and had to prepare it in a board. They had to lay out their information, decide, what their end result was, and display it in a way that they could then present it in a science fair so that other students, teachers, parents could come around and see what they did and understand it. At the end of it all, after the science fair, we asked students to go back and reflect on what they learned. What was their experience like at the science fair, both as a presenter and as a visitor. We asked them to think about what they learned about working with a team. Did they learn that it's a lot harder than they expected? They learned that they were a natural leader. So they were able to kind of do multiple things. They did a little bit of science, they did a little of self-reflecting, and they really did a good job presenting. So after the science fair, we chose 4 projects that we thought had a good spread of the different kinds of research and the different labs and activities that the students chose to present. So we'd like for them to have an opportunity to explain to you what they did.
Yep. So starting with Julia and Amelia's project.
My name is Amelia Janikula.
And my name is Julia Wonky.
And
our topic is how do different frequencies affect emotions?
The reason why I chose this topic is because I wanted to know why certain songs changed my mood.
My reason for this topic is because I wanted to learn how and why some songs made me feel happier and some songs made me feel sadder.
To show how frequencies affect emotions, we took the song Windy Waffles and changed it to have a higher and lower frequencies, also known as pitch.
During the science fair, we performed the experiment. We found out that when listening to the song for a short period of time, it didn't have much effect on emotions. But listening to it for a longer period of time will have a greater effect.
The 4 types of brainwaves, delta, theta, alpha, and beta, can be created through different frequencies. Delta waves are the slowest brainwave that happens during a deep state of sleep. Theta waves also happen in a dream state and help with learning and memory.
Alpha waves happen when we are more relaxed throughout the day and when our thoughts are flowing. Beta waves occur when we are more awake throughout the day and are moving at a faster pace with more attention.
We also created a model for each brainwave. The slower brainwaves, such as delta, have lower frequencies, and faster brainwaves, such as beta, have higher frequencies.
And we also created a brain model to show how each brainwave affects the mind. Higher frequency brainwaves, like the beta, cause more activity in the brain, while slower and lower brainwaves, like the delta, cause less activity in the brain. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morgan.
My name is Oksana.
And my name is Haley. The topic we chose was sound amplifiers. We chose this topic because we wanted to know which design was best for amplifying sound. We made 3 different designs and tested them with a decibel reader. In our 3 different designs, we had our paper speaker, our paper towel roll speaker, and our plastic, like PVC speaker. In design number 1, the only materials we used were paper and tape. This speaker was probably the worst at amplifying sound, and there wasn't that much of a change. And in our second speaker, the materials we used were 1 paper towel roll and 2 plastic cups, and we used hot glue to hold everything together. In our third design, we used 2 PVC pipes and 1 PVC coupling, and this was probably the best working speaker, and it improved sound a lot better than in the other ones. And the sound was just a lot louder with the hard plastic material.
Sorry. We received these results through, we thought was the best one was from the lengths of these speakers. There were obviously more ways, like the materials, the height, but we thought it was length due to them all being different lengths and them all showing different readings. This one was obviously the longest, and this one was also the quietest, and this one's the shortest, and this is the loudest. This could be shown in when the energy loses, the particles lose their energy over time after, like when they hit each other, vibrating, and that's why sound isn't forever long, and that's why we believe that one was the best. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Ethan Cooper, and today we'll be presenting to you explosive sounds.
Well, my name is Neil Patel.
And my name is Landon.
The reason why I chose this project is because of the general anonymity of sounds, of explosive noises more specifically, and how they affect our eardrums, and just generally how they affect us as people.
I was interested in this topic because I watch movies and play video games, and they include explosions, and I wanted to figure out how they made sound and why it was so loud.
I was also interested because I watch a lot of like action movies with like a lot of bombs in them, and I want to see like how it's caused.
We have a background of sound, and the definition of sound is an energy that travels through a medium such as air, and that contains longitudinal pressure waves. This presentation will help to explain how an explosion makes sound and how us humans measure and hear it. Sounds created from explosions are a result of shock waves. Shock waves are created when there is a sharp change of pressure in a medium such as air. These shock waves travel through the medium and into the eardrum where we hear the sound. A shock wave is only created from an explosion. Sound waves are longitudinal waves that travel through the air molecules. However, these are not visible to the human eye. They carry sound and are a wave full of rarefactions and compressions. Sound waves travel through a medium, usually air, and are the main reasons why explosions create sound. When a shock wave is created, it travels through the air and reaches the eardrum, and when it reaches the eardrum, it vibrates in our eardrum and creates the sound we hear.
Most of the sounds created by explosions are measured in something known as the decibel system. The decibel system was created by Alexander Graham Bell and is generally used today on how we measure very loud frequencies or very loud noises and just about everything in the sort. Our topic is important not only to the understanding of the general person of like how they perceive bombs, but just how noises are created, and it gives a overall general, better understanding of how sound works and how shock waves affect our ears. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of an explosion and how it works and how it creates sound. The initial process of an explosion can be quite cloudy because of the movies and films that paint them quite differently than how they actually happen. First, a detonator is initiated in the form of a fuse remote detonator, above the sort. Second, the detonator gets to extreme temperatures that triggers the explosive material inside of the bomb. Almost every bomb contains some type of explosive material that rapidly releases the energy that Neil was talking about, creates those shock waves. Third, a chemical reaction happens that releases a lot of energy and creates the shock wave that can be sent to our ear. Fourth, the explosion ends hastily and the noise is perceived by nearby fingers because of the shock wave entering our ear.
And to add on to the decibel system, as Ethan was saying, we made an explosive chart for reference, and it's like all of the decibels, all of the explosions that can like occur hearing loss, and it ranges all the way from fireworks to Krakatoa. And fun fact about Krakatoa, you could hear it from 3,000 miles away.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. This has been Explosive Sounds.
Hi, I'm Ariana DiDomenico.
And I'm Olivia Mata.
For the science fair, our driving question was, can adults and children hear the same frequencies? We chose this topic because when we talked to our grandparents, it was hard for them to hear us, but when we talked to our younger siblings, it was easier and clearer for them to hear us. We wanted to discover why this happened.
The scientific definition of sound is when vibrations travel through the air or another medium and can be heard when they reach a person's ear. Frequency is the rate at which something occurs or is repeated over a particular period of time or in a given sample. Frequency affects pitch. As someone gets older, their inner ears do too, causing them to simply not be able to hear as high frequencies. This is called high-frequency hearing loss. When high-frequency hearing loss begins to develop on an adult, they begin to have a harder time hearing higher-pitched noises. Certain noises with higher pitches, such as some letters or a child's voice, becomes difficult for those with high-frequency hearing loss to hear.
The older you get, the less you can hear. To investigate for a project, we first created a Google Forms and included different age brackets and frequencies 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 4 frequencies were 6,000 hertz, 12,000 hertz, 15,000 hertz, and 17,500 hertz. Then we had a frequency test with 4 different frequencies, and we would go around to younger kids, teens, young adults, middle-aged adults, and older adults and test them on all the frequencies. We took all the data from the Google form and made a graph with it to help represent the percentages each age group could hear high frequency.
This is an example of a frequency that we had played. In the end, our results came to a conclusion that all kids in the age range of 9 to 20 could hear 100% of all 4 frequencies. Adults 21 to 40 could hear 3/4 of the frequencies, while adults between the ages of 40 through 60 could only hear half of the frequencies. Those 60 to 80 years old could hear only the lowest frequency, and anyone above the age of 80 could not hear any frequencies. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope that you learned a little bit about sound, and I want to thank the 8th graders for coming and presenting today. Thank you.
So on behalf of the board, we want to thank the students who presented today. You obviously did a lot of research with each of your topics and also experimentation. All of those skills will serve you well when you hit high school and have to do your capstone project. So we thank you once again. I don't know if there's any questions that any board members would like to ask the students. If there are, this is a great time to put them on the spot.
I have a question. Thank you so much for presenting tonight. That was great. I'm just wondering the process you went through to pick your groups and select your topics. Because there was a wide range of topics, so I'd love to hear about that.
Volunteers.
So do you want me to?
Yeah.
So we let the students do a self-choice where they had to kind of look at both my class and Ms. Itunes' class and see who they thought they would work with the best. We also set a forum home so that their parents knew who they were working with, and they had the chance to have that conversation about, is it a good choice or is it something that needs to be adjusted. Throughout the project, we gave them surveys about once or twice a week and asked them how they thought their group was going. Do they need to check in with the teacher? Are there any issues that they're afraid to approach Ms. Itune or myself about, but would like for us to talk to them? So they had the chance to kind of self-monitor as they went along. When it came to the project choices, we gave them a list of some of the questions that they came up with, and then Mrs. Itune and I added to that kind of some ideas that we thought that they would be interested in. So they got some free choice for what they actually chose, and if they came up with something different and it was related to sound, we thought it was good, we let them go for it.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Adam.
I just found it interesting that the boys took the explosive sound and the girls were more on the music and in speakers. And the big question, I'm wondering if Mr. Urso was able to hear that last pitch. I'm not sure all those years of playing in the band, that's, yeah, okay. It's funny because my daughters can't hear me when I speak at home. I want to know if there's a correlation there.
That's called selective hearing.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate you presenting for us today. We always enjoy the student participation, so thanks. Brief recess here. We'll take a 5-minute break so that you can break down your projects. And oh, there's cookies over here on the back corner of the stage. Please help yourselves. Who's going to go first?
I am.
Ladies first.
So report cards were distributed last week, and junior prom is being held this Saturday, the 27th, and the spring band concert will be May 2nd at 7 p.m. in the auditorium, and the Upbeat May weekend is being held the 10th through the 12th of May.
So spring sports are totally underway. I'll update you guys a little later when the results are finalized. We start getting into playoffs and more high-stake games, because I know that's what you guys like to go out to. We have AP tests May 6th, so everyone taking AP tests are stressing at the school. They last through the 17th. On the 17th, all physics classes are going to Six Flags on our physics field trip. It's really fun. The clothing drive was last Saturday, April 13th. I just wanted to thank anyone in the crowd if you donated. That really helped out our all-night grad fundraiser. We filled up 2 full trucks of clothes, and I think that's going to be our most successful fundraiser. That's all we got.
Great, thank you. So I'm actually going to put you guys on the spot for a second. I'm curious to know if there's been any scuttlebutt at the school about the proposed cuts to the budget that we met on last week. You weren't able to attend that meeting, so we'd like to hear if there's anything that's come up in your interaction with your fellow students.
Yeah, one of my peers approached me. It was a similar situation to last year with, she said ESS was highlighted on the budget. I'm not sure if it was one of those things that's actually getting cut, but she said it was highlighted, and she just wanted to stress again how it saved a life. That's what she's pretty much saying to me. So if it got cut, that life could have went a little differently. So she was stressing the importance of that program again to me.
Some of my friends were convinced that marching band and the musical were getting cut, but after Mr. Benigni's presentation at Upbeat an hour or 2 ago, I think that was helpful because they had to learn and they could relay the message back to their parents.
I also had a couple angry parents that didn't want to pay for parking next year and about sports getting cut.
How come my grandchildren pay for the parking?
No, that's true. But yeah, there was some high emotions on that issue, so I'm not sure if it's going to be followed through with. But
we encourage you to bring forth anything that you do here. It is what we want to hear. It's part of why you are here on the board with us. So we appreciate your input and thank you. Next up, we have correspondence to the board. Before I turn it over to Mr. Benigni, I want to acknowledge that the board did receive a letter from Jan Zagorski. Jan, I want to thank you for the letter that you provided to us. I think it came on the 20th. I think that it was insightful. I think that it was right on. This is not decisions that we want to make, unfortunately. It's the position that we're in. But I think that you captured a lot of the way we feel about the issues as well. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to put that to us and also for the time you spend in our meeting. So thank you. Brian?
Yes, I have 2 correspondence to the board. The first, dear BOE staff, thank you for the beautiful flowers in honor of my mother. Your kind prayers and positive thoughts are so appreciated too. Take care. Sincerely, Laura Birch. The second, thank you for the beautiful plant you sent when my mother passed away. I am so thankful to work in such a terrific school district. Deb Liedermeyer, Willard Para.
Thank you, Brian. Is there any other correspondence to the board that has not been brought forth at this point? Okay. Next up, we will open up audience of citizens. If there's anyone who would like to address the Board of Education, feel free to do so. There's microphones on either side. We only ask that you provide name and address for the record. At this point, is there anybody who would like to address the Board of Education? Please.
Sara Patel, 65 Spona Road. My son Kian is a student at Griswold School, and I have a few concerns. And I know that you are all put in a very difficult position with the budget that has been proposed, and that you have to do the best that you can do. And I respect that, I understand that. My concern is that, and I can only speak for Griswold because I don't know the rest of the other school situations. So I will just speak specifically to there. Mr. Kitzman already runs a ship by himself, essentially. He has a head teacher who's a helper. but he does an amazing job. When I was informed over the weekend that we were also thinking about cutting Claire Kluke, the guidance counselor who serves both Griswold and Willard schools, I became really alarmed because there are not enough adults to help address students who have serious needs in Griswold. And I can only assume that goes for all of the elementary schools. And I know that there's also an administrator being cut because I read the proposed budget. So when we talk about student to staff ratio, and we want teachers in the rooms, I get that. I don't want anybody cut there either. But I am really concerned that we're cutting support for our most at-risk kids in our town, and that is becoming systemic because we're talking about a guidance counselor at our youngest kids level, helping transition to McGee. My son sees Claire, and she is his touchstone. He will absolutely be impacted if she is not there. But on behalf of all of the kids who see not only Claire, but all of our school counseling services, including ESS, how can we continue to do this to this population? And I know, again, I understand where you're at. I get it. But these are the kids who need us the most. And I can't help but wonder that with Claire doing the work she's doing, and I know it's been a certain number of years, but I have to wonder if we continue to let her do her work, her good work, would we need ESS in a few years at the high school? It's like we're cutting off the bottom before we see the results that could really benefit and help us later. And so I just urge you to really think about that. I'm sure you have, but I'm here to ask you to do that again. And just on behalf of those kids who really need that assistance to be successful in school, to really consider keeping her on and expanding that school counseling. I know expand, that's a crazy word to say right now, I get it. But to just really continue to support the kids who need it. K through 12, all the kids who really need those touchstones in the building. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the words, and it is something that we will consider. Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, Dawn Primo, 233 Elwood Road. Like Sara Patel, I'm speaking in regards to the school counseling position being eliminated at the elementary level. For 10 years, our school counselor, Ms. Kluke, has been a vital member of our school community. She helps numerous students in the areas of academic achievement and personal social development. Our job as educators and parents is to ensure students become the productive, well-adjusted adults of tomorrow. Our school counselor serves as a support for teachers, developing behavior plans, providing strategies for the classroom, assisting with collecting of data, to just name a few. I never go by her office when she is not with a student, teacher, or parent. We are all concerned with the loss of this important position. Ms. Kluke has serviced many of my personal students in the past. She deeply cares for the social emotional well-being and was always in constant communication with me. Honestly, I'm in disbelief that this position would even be on the board to be cut. We always say we need more mental health support, not less. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the Board of Education? Seeing no hands, I will close audience of citizens. We thank you for your comments, and we will take all of your comments under consideration as we continue down this difficult road. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like to add or remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I have a motion by Julia, second by Carrie. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, we move into our new business portion of our agenda. First up, we have the Next Generation Accountability Reports. I turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Dr. Erin McGee.
Thank you. Just checking it. No, it's not on. I'm getting close. It's just because you're old.
Check, check.
Sorry about that. I'm just going to hold it. Yeah, the age brackets of the hearing stuff earlier. You know, I was checking with Linda Holian down there, but she seemed to be able to hear all of it. I was like, So I'm going to present tonight the results of the Next Generation Accountability System Report for 2017-2018. So you know that every year the State Department of Education gathers data on a number of factors that weigh into the overall accountability report for the district. The reason that it's the 2017 to 18 and we're presenting it now in 2019 is that it takes quite a bit of time for the data from last year to be pulled together from all of the districts to be able to create the annual reports. So the accountability system is set up to serve several important purposes as a state tool. That's right. So now I can tell who's really interested in seeing it. Just kidding. Some of you can just turn around where you are. The accountability system serves several important purposes, primarily to help us track progress, to look at ways for our districts to make improvements, to recognize successes, and to promote transparency by presenting reports that are common across all of the state's schools and individual districts so that you can look at them for purposes of comparison. Several changes were made several years ago now in the whole accountability system. And if you may remember, in one of the earlier versions of the accountability system, the results were only centered on standardized test results. And in the last go-around, when we switched from the previous accountability system to the next generation system, many additional indicators were added, including things like arts access, physical fitness, college and career readiness, to get a more balanced picture of what was happening across the schools. Another important change is that it emphasizes growth on state tests, not just the overall percentage of students who score at particular levels. And they've worked very carefully to adjust the classification methodology. So the 12 indicators that are there now are so there's several that are around academic growth, the assessment participation, which is the number of students, the percentage of students who participate in all of the different state testing, the absenteeism, whether kids are taking coursework that is preparing them for college and career readiness, whether they're successful on the exams like AP that measure those successes. There are several indicators that look at whether students are on track for graduation. So looking at freshmen and seeing who is on track as a freshman, and then looking 4 years out and 6 years out to see how we do with graduation. Looking at the number of students that enter post-secondary, the physical fitness tests, and art access, which is students that are enrolled in art classes at the high school level. Oops. So the indicators are weighted differently at the different school levels. And this is because in some of our grade levels, like at the elementary school and the middle school, you see, for example, that red bar in the middle that is the weight that is given to the growth on the tests. In those grade levels, students take the same Smarter Balanced Assessment in 3rd grade, in 4th grade, in 5th grade, in 6th grade, up to 8th grade. So we're able to look at their growth over time. At the high school, the state accountability test is the SAT, which is given one time for accountability purposes. So there is no growth measure at the high school because they just take it that one time. So when we're looking at accountability scores, We have an accountability index, which is the overall of all the possible points that we can earn on all of the indicators, as well as performance indicators that allow us to drill down to individual subject areas. When we look at subject-specific index scores, we look at the scale scores, which I'll explain in just a minute. And the intent of the scale scores is to be more sensitive to growth. So for example, a student who scored in the low, I'm going to shift to the slide. Those two green dots represent two students who scored at level 2. And in the new system of accountability, the student who scored at the higher end of that level 2 bracket is weighted with more points than a student who scores at the lower end of that level 2 bracket. So essentially the districts get credit for students who make that kind of movement, even though they have not yet crossed over into the next band of achievement. So in the previous accountability measures, it was a straight up how many kids scored at level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and it didn't matter where you scored within that band. Now the rating is more sensitive to take that into account. Another important part of the accountability index is looking at achievement gaps. And so anyone who's followed education in Connecticut and across the nation knows that achievement gaps are issues with many of our subgroups of students. In this particular measure, when we're looking at achievement gaps, we're looking at areas where the gap is higher than the mean plus 1 standard deviation. When we look at indicator 2, which is academic growth, I think I spoke to this earlier, that we're looking at having the students' vertical scores move on the scale as they move from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade. Not simply are they progressing along, but how their growth compares to targets that are set for individual students based on their past performance. So when we look at the Berlin Public Schools district level report, you see that the column that is just after the names of the indicator is the indicator, the index for that area. They're weighted with different amounts of points. So you can get 100 points in some areas, 50 points in some areas. And the overall accountability index for our schools is 81.0 this year. That compares to a state average of 74.9. When we look at our individual content areas in English language arts and math, we have an achievement gap in math at the district level. We do not have an achievement gap at the district level in English language arts or in the graduation rate. There's no scores there for science because we're just in the process now of transitioning from the previous CMT and capped science assessments to the next generation science assessments, and those scores are not yet included in this. So when we look at school accountability assignments, school category assignments, you'll see that something that's new now is that the indexes are based on a criterion reference cut score. So from here moving forward, schools that are in category 1 have to have an accountability index between 85 and 100. In category 2 from 70 to 84.9 and so on. That rating used to float based on quartiles. So it used to be that your performance was compared to how other schools in the state did, and now there are set measures that we're trying to achieve. And when we look at our individual scores, we see that the 3 elementary schools are all leveled at category 2. McGee is category 3, and you see the achievement gap in math. And Berlin High School in this measurement is rated as a category 3 as well, with an achievement gap in both ELA and in math. Some of these achievement gaps you'll know that we talked about earlier in this year when I shared the accountability test results, and we looked at some of the differences between our high need subgroups and typical kids at the grade level. We were notified that that Willard Elementary School was named as a 2017 to 2018 School of Distinction, and they were recognized for being in the top 10% of points for high growth students with high needs in the area of English language arts. So at Willard School in particular, the growth for students with high needs was very strong last year. The next few slides show some of the things that we're doing across the board. So you know when we get accountability results, the most important thing is that we're looking at it to see what does this tell us about how our district is doing and what are we doing about it in the spirit of continuous improvement that has such a rich history in the Berlin Public Schools. So when we look across the 3 elementary schools, this doesn't list every single thing that's happening, but for example, we're providing teachers in grades 2 to 5 Math Studio professional development through the Teacher Development Group. We've been working with students to take the IAB, which is a small assessment that is similar to the Smarter Balance assessments that give students the opportunity to practice with the IABs to see what that looks like in their classroom and to be used to taking assessments on the computer. The IABs give feedback to classroom teachers so that they can help target students' individual needs based on those results. They've got a mini test prep unit in English language arts to look at helping prepare students for the ELA portion. And you can see a number of other activities that are going on there that require collaboration between our literacy and math specialists, the special education teachers, and the general education teachers working together to try to raise student achievement. At McGee Middle School, you see some of the same things happening, and that's not to be redundant, but when we are identifying strategies that we think make a difference in terms of improving student achievement, if they're appropriate to do at multiple levels, we're trying to do that same work at multiple levels. So you see some of the areas like the Math Studio work and the work around the IABs in English language arts and in math. You see things like the review and action planning for students with chronic absenteeism. So that's been a strong push in collaboration with the town, with DCF, and looking at other resources to see what we can do around students with chronic absenteeism, because we know that students who miss a lot of school are unlikely to achieve well on our standardized testing. And many of you are familiar with the changes in the physical education program at McGee that is designed to help build students' wellness on an individual level, and we hope will over time show results on the physical fitness assessment. At the high school, there's also a lot going on. We've been looking very closely at the PSAT, SAT data to help us inform instruction and to update assessments. And so you see a number of activities that are around using the PSAT and SAT data, including having the English language arts and math teachers setting their own student learning objectives for the teacher evaluation process based on teacher performance in those on student performance in those areas. A lot of work done around math curriculum revision, and again, professional development through things like bringing Kate Roberts in to support strong instructional practices in reading and writing. So overall, when we look at the accountability index of reports, we're looking at this as a tool to help give us more information about the state of student achievement across the district, and to use this to help inform our practices moving forward. That's it.
Questions?
Adam?
Yeah, just a quick question. I noticed on the last slide you mentioned Khan Academy, and I'm not familiar with it, but I just heard my daughter talking about it now. That's something that's offered already free to students through the current programs to do some practice tests for PSATs?
Yes, Khan Academy has partnered with the College Board, and that partnership has supported Khan Academy in developing online practice modules related to PSAT and SAT tested skills that are all Common Core skills now. And it allows the school system to help students link their accounts so that the school system can get feedback on how much and how often the kids are actually using Khan Academy. So we get I get a report as the assistant superintendent telling me at each grade level how many kids have been matched up with that. Because as you know, when you think about things like achievement gaps, one of the concerns is that particularly at the high school level, that there's been a long history of having some students have access to prep courses and to outside tutors, and Khan Academy's work is designed to help level that playing field so the kids can actually do small online assessments, get feedback, and they essentially get feedback that says, if you're struggling with this, you could watch this video and practice this skill. That's designed to help support that.
That's great. Are the students taking advantage of it? Are you seeing that the various grades are using
Well,
it?
we have 2 live students right here. So we could ask the live students. Do you know students that are using Khan Academy?
Yeah, I use Khan Academy for the SAT. Oh yeah, I used Khan Academy for studying for the SAT.
When I went through the process last year, I thought it was one of the most useful tools in my studying. Like, I didn't have an outside tutor or anything like that, so like she said, it leveled the playing field. So.
And it's free.
And it's 100% free.
My daughter's
So-
still using it. She's up as a junior in college.
When you link your account, it analyzes the questions you got wrong, and Taylor makes a schedule of topics. Oh, sorry. So when she said it links your account with the College Board, it's going to look at your PSAT or ST that you took, and it's going to look at the questions you got wrong, and then tailor make your schedule of what to practice based on what you got wrong. So it's targeted practice. So.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, fire away.
Erin, I have one question for you that perhaps you can help clarify for, so a while back, it was reported that our math SAT scores at the high school were pretty remarkable, meaning quite good. I believe it was math, correct? And first in the dirt, thank you. I'm getting in my ear. Can you clarify for folks why we would have an achievement gap in math and English at the high school, what that actually means, what we're talking about, an achievement gap? Because I think that could be misinterpreted by folks.
Yes, so when we're looking at an achievement gap, when we're looking at the data that I shared, which was the DIRG ranking, that looks at the percentage of students that met the college and career readiness standard, and essentially is looking at the percentage of all of the kids at the high school who met that standard. Last year's class did very well on that assessment in terms of overall the number of students who reached that bar. When we're looking at an achievement gap, you break out the data and you look at students, for example, in the high needs subgroup who are English learners, who receive special education services, or who live in families that qualify for free to reduced lunches. That whole group is together as one group. That's the high needs subgroup. So we had a difference in terms of how the overall students at Berlin High School performed compared to how the high needs subgroup compares. The overall group still includes those kids with high needs. So when you look at those overall results, that's one of the reasons that we break out the data to look at different subgroups, is that sometimes the performance of the individual subgroups, as you know, can be masked in the overall performance. So you can both have high overall achievement and also have a subgroup gap.
So I'll ask this question. Do you have the resources that you need at this point to close that gap going forward?
That is a great question. I'm pausing because if it were as simple as giving extra resources to it, every place in the country that has any money would not have an achievement gap, and that's simply not true. Because the achievement gap, I've also heard people refer to it as an opportunity gap, that sometimes other factors in students' lives influence their behavior and performance on standardized assessments. For some of our students who receive special education services, they receive special education services by virtue of having a disability that impacts their ability to access a general ed curriculum. And so it's more complicated than just having additional resources.
Okay. I think we ask that if there are things that the district needs, that you bring them forward so we can help resolve some of that.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Aaron. Next up, we have the status of the Board of Education's adopted budget for 2019-2020. Brian, if you want to tell us where the work is taking you so far, and then I'm sure we probably have some discussion to go along with this. I know that I had a conversation with Tim Oakes, who's out of town, for some things for us to consider as well. So
at this point, all of the personnel that we spoke of that needed to be contacted, I believe by the close of the school day today, administrators spoke to their staff and let them know of potential reductions or eliminations within the building. So if I could just review those with you. At the elementary level, as you heard tonight, the school counselor position, also one tech integration position amongst the 3 elementary schools. We'll reconfigure how tech integration is done at the 3 elementaries.
Brian, can you pull your mic closer?
Sure. So at the elementary level, the school counselor position, as you heard this evening. Also at the elementary level, tech integration, one tech integration specialist at the elementary. We'll reconfigure amongst the 3 schools how tech integration is supported. At McGee Middle School, we have a .6 world language. We also have a phys ed health and wellness position that will not be filled. And we also have a math teacher. At the high school, it'll be .5 science, .5 English, and .2 social studies, which does not give us 6, it gives us 5.8, and I believe that'll get us close to the reduction amount of $500,000 that was spoken about. We've also met with the assistant principal at McGee about the reduction of that position. So any personnel that would be impacted. There's also been some shifts in positions. People have been notified of involuntary transfers. We have a tech integration specialist at McGee that will be taking the tech ed position, the open tech ed position based on retirement at the high school. These people have all been notified of those positions and their assignment for next year. I've not looked at the stipends at this time to give you a report on what stipends would be cut.
any questions for Brian at this point? So one of the conversations I had earlier today with Tim Oakes, who again, he's out of town on business, but one of the things that he suggested and asked that I bring forward is that as we look at these cuts, that perhaps we need to consider that larger class sizes are the way to go, if that means that it hangs on to support services such as the elementary school counselor that we heard about, or tech integration, or for that matter, any of the extracurriculars that are out there. We have been pretty consistent saying that class sizes, particularly at the elementary, are an important thing for us to keep at a minimum as best we can. and we've done a very good job of doing that over time. But with the considerable reductions that we've had over the last 5 years in not only teaching positions, there's been many of them in the last 5 years, but also I don't want to use the term behind the scenes, but because they're not right out in front of everybody, the support that's out there, that's been eroded away significantly, and unfortunately, we have to look at all aspects. So I put Tim's suggestion out there for discussion with no course of action, but I'm interested if anybody has any thoughts on what he has brought forth.
Hey, Rich. Brian, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know if you know the answer to this yet, if you've gone this far. The .5, the high school positions I'm talking about, the .5 science, the .5 English, and the .2 social studies. So .2 social studies is one course. Are we talking about an elective that's not going to run, or are we talking about a core course now that dissipates more kids? As Tim had brought up, are the class sizes going to be bigger in like a U.S. history class or civics?
At this point, I believe it'll be At this point, I believe it will be a core class that will run. The students will be dispersed in larger class sizes. The issue we're running into at the high school is the classrooms really can't accommodate 28 or 30 students. They're not that large. So when you have that many desks in the room, oftentimes they don't fit.
So the same thing in the English and science, these are probably going to be larger core classes
There'll
that
be a
come about?
larger core, but there are some electives that will be cut in those areas because we're talking about .5.
Right.
And it also means that, you know, there's some movement in science because we do have a department head position. So there'll be a load that's reduced, and the same thing in English. So someone that is 1.0 will not be 1.0 next year.
Thank you.
I have a question. So to entertain Tim's thought about going to larger class sizes versus cutting support staff, where will we be able to cut teachers to make larger class sizes? So Brian, you just said that the rooms at the high school can't hold larger class sizes. So have you looked into where at the elementary or the middle this could happen? Is this even possible?
To increase class sizes, you would reduce staff, obviously. So you would teach core teaching staff to replace the support staff. At the elementary level, it may be possible in specific grade levels. I would have to look at the population and the number of teachers at that grade level. So for instance, if there's 4 teachers at a grade level and the class sizes are at 20, right, we're just going to take those 4. Now it's an increase of 5 across the board, right? So you're now going to go to 25 in a classroom. Those numbers really have not ever, in my years, taken place at the elementary where you're having 25, especially in the primary grade levels. That's totally new territory. The elementary over the last 6 years has not had the cuts. We've really maintained the class sizes at the elementary. The cuts have been at McGee and at the high school. And if we look to change things, we've already last year took a huge cut out of the high school and McGee. You would be decreasing the specials even further. So to answer your question, right now McGee is down to 6 teams. McGee at one point had 3 6th grade teams, a team that was 7th, 8th grade split, 2 7th and 2 8th. It's down to 6. So the class sizes are pretty large at McGee right now with having 6 teams. And there's not a course running at the high school that's single digits. Not a core class that's running.
Again, no directives here, Brian. We're just, like you, it keeps us awake at night too. So we're just trying to look at what all the options are as we go forward here. Because as most know, the 4x8 signs of Axe the Tax have already gone up. And there's already an article in the Berlin Citizen from the Republican Town Committee saying to vote no too high. So if the referendum follows course, we'll be back here with additional decisions to have to make. So We encourage anybody to go out there to pass the word around of where we are today and to vote their conscience, to vote their conscience. We're not directing one way or the other so that we're clear, but at least have an informed vote. Any other questions for Brian?
I have a question, a comment, really. I wasn't here last week on the 15th, so I apologize for that. This is probably going to go back to what I said a couple weeks ago regarding the sports again. With looking at the numbers of how many kids are playing sports and what the cost per student is based on what sport they play, why are we not discussing further, not necessarily an entire pay-to-play, but a pay-to-play portion? It brings in a pretty significant amount of money. Why is that not something that we are bringing up?
So I can I just this is we spent, I think,
I know you did. That's what I'm asking.
long time discussing the
But why
pluses
isn't
and
it
minuses of
going anywhere?
the pay to participate, pay to play, pay to whatever it was,
Activity fee was.
What's
Yes,
that?
activity fee.
Activity
fee.
fees, right. We've come up with multiple different names of the same thing. And I think that we kind of settled on the same point, and actually Brian said it the best, that public education means opportunities for all students equally. The athletics and activities are a part of that, and once you implement fees, then it becomes something for the haves and have-nots. Did I summarize that?
Yes.
Appropriately, Brian? And after much discussion, I think that we settled that at this point we were not ready to implement activity fees or pay to participate fees at this point, although parking fees we accepted and are going to move forward with that. Is really, after a very lengthy discussion, that's kind of where we settled.
So this is just me thinking out loud. I look at the middle school, which obviously I work a lot with, and without, I mean, you know, when school gets out at 2:20 and they're home and doing who knows what, because we don't have the ability to provide sports or, you know, after-school activities. We really don't have the capability of losing an assistant principal. It's crazy here. I mean, with the amount of stuff that these two individuals deal with on a daily basis with this transitionary age group, I'm just trying to think outside the box of, no, you don't need to pay for the entire sport, but is there a way, and I get what you're saying with the have not, but we're taking away from, I mean, Claire Kluge, it's two schools that, you know, we talked about the need for social, emotional, and we can't afford to take that away. So if you're talking about the have-nots, well, what about all of the kids that need just the basic emotional, social, and academic support? I mean, I'm not saying that that athletics is not important. By no means am I saying that. My children both participate. I'm just saying that we need to at least leave that discussion open and just, you know, maybe a little more creativity outside of the.
So Jamie, one thing we did talk about was having like intramurals at the middle school, or like a rec league or something like that, if one of you guys want to jump in. That is something that we talked about. So though we're cutting the McGee sports, we want to make sure there is still something else. It just won't be to the extent it is. So students still have opportunities. They just won't be playing other towns. So we did have a lengthy discussion, at least an hour around that.
Which I absolutely agree. I'm just saying, if there is a small portion that each student has to pay or whatnot, it brings in enough to pay for the athletics and then additional money to pay for some other costs as well. If you look at the cost per student, each sport is different on what it costs. Obviously, football is more expensive per person than, you know, track.
I just want to say, I mean, I could not agree more. And I think it's a little bit of a false dichotomy to say it's have and have-nots, because now we're creating this situation where it's truly the have and have-nots, because there are opportunities for sports for middle school students. They're just very expensive. They're outside of the school. So now you've got a situation where, perhaps you could afford a $100 activity fee, but you're not going to afford $1,500 for
One of the problems, to respond to that, it was roughly, we did the math, and it was about $250 per student to fund the middle school sports, as it stands now. So if you say, all right, well, what if they just pay $100? What's still $150 that's going to come out of the Board of Ed, which means now we're talking about a teacher again.
No, we're talking about having all student athletes at the high school, and there's 1,167 kids that are playing sports between the two schools. So if you have each of them pay $100, it doesn't even have to be $100. That brings in, what, 1.2?
The point is not necessarily, I understand the math as you laid it out, but as Jamie points out, if for instance, everyone in middle school and high school had a $100 activity fee, that would fund nearly all the middle school sports and many of the activities. Something creative like that. Again,
Yes.
we can't do the
Just
math
thinking
here, right
outside
here
the
at
box.
the
Right.
board in this discussion, but I think we should leave open those opportunities when we look at the numbers. Maybe it's not all sports, maybe it's not all the activities, but I think there are some numbers we need to look at. And I think we did leave the door open for fees as a possible.
I think future conversations, we left it open because this is still just preliminary conversation we're having at this
Yeah.
point.
So, through you, Mr. Chair. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's a sad day when we're trying to decide which teachers to keep, which social workers, guidance counselors, sports, activities. I mean, all the things that we're talking about are the exact things that make the students who they are. So I don't want anyone to think that we're demeaning any one area over another. I think it's sad. I think we have an extreme lack of leadership on the town side to put us in this position where we are right now. People have an opportunity now to make a choice and voice their opinion on April 30th. My hope is that it goes to a point where there might be additional funds added back into the Board of Education budget. But to all this discussion right now, we may be receiving further cuts. So even with charging activity fees or what have you, it still might not be enough. I mean, pretty soon we're going to be charging fees for the textbooks and for all the crayons and pencils and charging for the Chromebooks and charging for everything. I mean, we're going down a very bad road right now. And it's sad where Berlin used to be the cream of the crop and the town where everyone wanted to move into. And my parents moved from New Britain into Berlin. This was like their dream town to be in. We even and we were in Southington for a brief moment in time, then we moved to Berlin. And I'm looking at the surrounding towns around us who are growing with economic development, grand list growth that then provides funding into their educational system so they don't have to go through these discussions. When I see that happening all around us, except for in Berlin, that's a problem. So I have a hard time making decisions right now without looking at the top and saying, you guys need to do more to help us. So sadly, this is not the final discussion because we don't know where things are going to stand after the referendum. Hopefully it's a positive outcome for the board, but the fees that we've talked about, I think everything's still on the board and up for discussion because we don't know where we're going to be.
Any further discussion on where we are with the budget right now? All right. Next up, we have non-renewal of contracts for non-tenured staff. Superintendent of Schools Brian Benigni is recommending the non-renewal of contracts of employment for the following non-tenured staff: Megan Diorio, Christopher Dresco, Mary Kate Farley, Justin Farrell, Kelly Milburn, and Michelle Sanito. If I could have a motion. You got it.
I hate to do this motion.
I know.
Do it.
Reluctantly, I move that the contracts of employment for the following non-tenured teachers not be renewed for the 2019-2020 school year upon their expiration at the end of the current school year. Megan Diorio, Christopher Dresco, Mary Kate Farley, Justin Farrell, Kelly Milburn, and Michelle Sanito.
One-year contracts. Yes, one-year contracts.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Carrie, second from Rich.
Before we take a vote, can we just have a little discussion on that?
Yes, I was just going to say discussion. So that for clarification, these contracts are one-year contract, and if I'm not mistaken, we need to give out non-renewal notice by a certain date in order to avoid what?
That's correct. So we need to give out non-renewal notice by May 1st. So all of the teachers listed knew when they signed the contract it was 1 year, but it was a one-year contract. So we still have to notice it and put it in the minutes and have it presented to the board for non-renewal.
Okay.
And even though, and I understand that these people came in knowing it was a one-year contract, but by having a motion and voting on not renewing their contracts, does that do anything for them going into the future, like on their resume? I mean, does this reflect poorly on them?
No, they never would say they were non-renewed for cause.
Okay.
These were one-year positions, so on their application it would just state they had a one-year position in Berlin Public Schools, whatever position it was. It was a one-year contract. They were taking a maternity leave. Someone was away taking courses, so there's a reason for it 1 year.
So to ask one question, so these are all non-tenured people hired on one-year contracts?
That's correct.
And are any of them going to possibly be brought back next year to fill vacancies?
At this time, I can't answer that.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next up, we have a facility-related update. Mr. Cugno, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, just a few updates. Willard Vestibule Project is proceeding. I spoke with Dr. Correa this afternoon. He was very pleased, or I was very pleased to hear that the renovations are taking place without much interruption to the students or the staff. It appears that the project is on time and on budget and should be completed in the next few weeks. This is the first of 4 vestibule projects that the board and the town have supported under our safety and security plans. I'd also like to report that the plans and investment in updating cabling and new cameras in our schools, also for safety and security, have begun, and we plan to perform most of those improvements starting this summer. Lastly, the planning firm that was hired to design a new blast program room at McGee recently finished its programming and schematic design of the renovations. We hope to adopt a schedule and budget shortly. We plan to have that room completed by the start of the next school year. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Okay. Next up, item number E is policy review and revision. It's a second reading and adoption on 3 different policies. Policy 3323, purchasing. Policy 6161.1, evaluation and selection of text and instructional materials. And policy 6161.11, selection of instructional materials to be deleted. This is a second reading. Revisions were reviewed by the ad hoc committee for policy review on a meeting on March 25th. The first reading took place on at the March 25th board meeting. Selection for text and instructional materials have been merged into one policy, which is 6161.1. Therefore, there is no longer a need for policy 6161.11, selection of instructional materials. I'll entertain a motion for consideration regarding policy revision.
I'll make a motion that the board adopt the revised policy 3323, purchasing and policy 6161.1, evaluation and selection of texts and instructional materials as presented, and delete policy 6161.11, selection of instructional materials.
Motion by Adam,
Second.
second by Julia. Any discussion regarding these policy changes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Next up, interestingly enough, we have a proposed affordable residential planned development, 319 units. An application has been made to amend the Berlin zoning regulations to rezone approximately 19.4 acres of land on Atkins Street for the purpose of developing affordable housing. The Planning and Zoning Department is asking for comments regarding the application. Public hearing regarding the application is scheduled for June 6th, 2019. Brian, do you have anything to add other than what we have here in the agenda? The only thing I would tell you is that my understanding is this is in the Hubbard district.
Just that many housing units, we definitely would have concerns with Hubbard accommodating that many students in the Hubbard district, so that would require some creative thinking. And it's not just Hubbard, it's also what that would do long-term to the schools. And looking at our projected enrollment, that would totally shift the projected enrollment leveling off, and we'd probably go back to numbers in excess if you think of where we were years ago. So I don't know, I look to, I don't know what the likelihood of this passing, but it would definitely mean some long-term planning for us in terms of the capacity at Hubbard or redistricting at that point. Now that many units.
Adam?
I was actually involved with this piece of property years ago. This is when the town acquired Pistol Creek, and there was leftover property. I'm not going to get into the legalese of it. I think that there was an agreement reached back in 2008 that was going to require the property owner to keep those to single lot residences, approximately 13. So I'm not exactly sure where the 319 came from. I'm not sure if the affordable housing laws allow that, but quite frankly, I think this is an outrageous request in a completely, 319 units in the small areas. It's a very dense population, dense project, and from a Board of Ed standpoint, and the reason why it's coming to us is just to see what impact it would have on the board. I mean, it would have a very drastic impact for 319 units. If you figure even 1 point something, say 1.5 children per housing unit, I mean that could have a major impact on what we're doing in our schools from even a redistricting standpoint. But I'm not sure if they're looking for comments or a vote, but I don't think that anybody here would be in favor of seeing this plan go through as presented.
All right. Thank you, Adam. There is no action on this tonight. It's here for our review. And I believe that it states that there'll be a town meeting on this. I think I said June 6th, at which point any concerns could be brought up. If I understand this right, Adam, this is the parcel of land that runs next to and towards the back of Pistol Creek now?
It wraps around the clubhouse. It's in back of the clubhouse on Atkins Street, and then across the street is the Middletown portion. So the clubhouse would be
319 units in there, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
If they're looking for shock value, I think they got it.
So, Brian, I guess we would want at least a brief analysis of what that would look like to the Hubbard district and the district as a whole, should you even get one student per unit going in there, and how that would impact the schools. I mean, frankly, you always want to hear about district growth, right? But you want to plan for it accordingly, so. Questions? Okay. Let's see. I think next up, we have an executive session, correct?
Yes.
So I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter, inviting Superintendent Benigni. Anyone else need to be included? Just the superintendent. I have a motion by Carrie.
Second.
Second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We're in executive session at 8:29. No action, correct?
No action.
There'll be no action, so we will not be coming back. So where's our video guys? We're good.